Got a question for you. Is it possible that no SEC team makes it to the college football playoffs? And is this the biggest game in the Jimbo Fisher era at Texas A&M as they get ready to head out to Oxford to take on Ole Miss? Welcome into Up to the Second College Football, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Enter for your chance to win a $10,000 Academy gift card plus SEC championship game tickets just by signing into the Academy app for the ultimate SEC football sweepstakes, which runs between October 8th through November the 18th. No purchases necessary. Odds depend on entries received. It ends again on November the 18th. You can find complete rules at academy.com/official-rules. So Billy and Caroline are going to examine that big game between LSU and Alabama. What is it going to mean for the SEC? Plus, I talk with CBS Sports' Dennis Dodd about all things happening in the world of college football. It's Up to the Second College Football.
Need a new grill? Academy Sports and Outdoors is the destination for your outdoor cooking needs. With our free in-store assembly and pre-assembled grills and smokers, buy online at academy.com and pick up in-store. So keep those grilling plans at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
All right, our next guest is a good one. Dennis Dodd of CBS Sports, breaking it all down in college football. Dennis, welcome to Up to the Second College Football. How you doing, bud?
Glad to be here. Week 10, ready to go.
Hey, so I want to start off something big SEC question, right? And I know the answer is yes, it's possible, but how possible is it that an SEC team doesn't get into the college football playoffs this year?
Well, we'll have that conversation Saturday night more if LSU beats Alabama. And, that leaves it up to basically Georgia to get into the playoff. That being said, I think Georgia can, quote unquote, afford a loss between now and the end of the season and still get in because of their body of work. And I know the schedule's not great, but at some point, you have to look at this team. And I was there in Jacksonville Saturday, and they're pretty stout. No Brock Bowers. Carson Beck is surprisingly the number 8 passer in the country. That one got past me when I saw that, but and their defense is just, we don't know their names like we did in the past. I'm talking about national scope. 19 draft choices, 8 in the first round in the last 3 years, but they're dang good.
Well, Dennis, I do want to ask you about Georgia because although their schedule has been easy, it does get ramped up here the next couple of weeks. Mizzou, Ole Miss, Tennessee. Do you see a loss in any of those three?
I don't. I guess Tennessee is the biggest hurdle as it was before the season. It was at Auburn late September and then November 18th at Tennessee in a revenge game. Tennessee seems kind of redefined itself as sort of a more defensive club. So yeah, maybe, but I'm writing about Missouri this week, and it's just kind of I don't want to say a courtesy. They've had a fine season, turnaround season for Eli Drakowitz, the guy who never had a winning record. Missouri's going to have one now. And this team was the upset kings of the 70s. For those of you that weren't born yet in the 70s, Mizzou is historically well equipped to do this, but they won't for all the reasons I just mentioned about Georgia.
Dennis, how about for Alabama? Man, the turnaround, we saw it in real time happen from the team that played early on to what they are now. LSU, obviously, it's going to be a tough matchup for them, even at home. After that, Auburn, no. Kentucky, they haven't shown up in big games. This is the big match.
Yeah, I think Alabama still should be harboring hopes about getting back into the playoff, because that would mean they would beat Georgia in the championship game and have quite a resume. They're only lost to Texas, but I still haven't figured Alabama out. I don't know who they are. I don't know if you agree, but I've always kind of know who Alabama is. In 14, they radically switched to the spread. For some reason or another, Nick didn't have a quarterback in the room this year, and I still haven't figured that one out. Trying to get by with Jalen Milroe, who happens to be a great athlete who plays football. I think that's the best way to describe him at some point. Their left tackle has given up more sacks than anybody in the country. Offensive line's been shaky. Defense has been good. So it's just maybe a game manager plus at quarterback, and then a really good defense, and they're going to ride that the rest of the way.
Talking to Dennis Dodd here on Up to the Second College Football. Dennis, how about LSU? Are you surprised? Maybe surprised is not the right word, but have they fixed their season? Like offensively, absolutely. But has the defense done enough for you to be like, they may get this one in Tuscaloosa?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Going on the road, I suspect Alabama will drag them down in the mud a little bit. They won't score their typical 49 or whatever they're scoring. Still haven't figured out what they're doing with Harold Perkins. That seemed like a mistake from the beginning. How do you leave a talent like that inside? So, we'll see. It's kind of got that look. Well, I shouldn't say that. They've lost twice, but kind of the same profile as the 19 team. That 19 team had a bunch of draft picks on the defense, though, too. So I'm not ready to go there, them being a complete team. And this is going to be still have to play, obviously, A&M at the end. But I think we'll know more about them out of the playoff race. Still in the West, and that's what they have to play for. That's why this is a fun game to go to Saturday. There's a story either way, but I thought Tennessee might be that team, and they're more equipped defensively, and they just blew it. They're up by 13 and got boat raced. That's why that's part of the reason I can't figure out Alabama. That's them in summary. They're up 20-7 at half, and then, now we're threatened, and we're just going to go ahead and score the next 37 points or whatever it was, next 30 points. So, so we'll see on LSU.
Let's move on to A&M, a team that isn't going to reach the potential that many people expected. I thought this was a 9-3, 8-4 team. That is certainly still in play. But when we think about this game at Ole Miss, how important is it to what Jimbo is trying to convince people it's still possible?
Ole Miss has an outside shot at not only the West, but playoff, and they seem to be coming together at this point. And Lane's done a pretty good job. I think a top 10 finish for them is realistic, but I'm having a hard time with A&M. It's just they're there. Obviously, the injury at quarterback hurt a lot, but they're doing okay with Max. I don't understand why this defense, given where it came from and that recruiting class isn't dominating more. So it's just it's a middle of the road SEC team. It's not to say they can't win at Ole Miss. I think it's going to be tough, but I don't know. It's just like there's no there right now for A&M.
Dennis, outside of the Miami game, the defense has been pretty solid. I mean, it only gave up one touchdown to Tennessee, one touchdown to Bama, although Tennessee was able to run on them. Other than that, it's just really the Miami game that jumps out, and I think DJ Durkin kind of switched up his aggressiveness, and that's where you've seen the 33 sacks come from that point. Yeah,
but it's not. They're not playing complementary football. They're not a complete team, and I guess in year 6, why?
Yeah.
That's what I keep coming back to. So we'll see.
Do you enjoy the Jimbo and Lane Kiffin kind of feud that seems to be one-sided? Lane's won on the field, and he's won in the highlights at least on social media.
Yeah, I have a vague idea of what he said this week. Lane being Lane, but he's grab your popcorn, and then he gets boat raced at. That was a couple of years ago at Alabama. So. No, I actually know that on the scale of dueling coaches, that falls somewhere below, or cranky coaches, somewhere below Dabo, Dave Doran, Dion, and Pat Narduzzi. They stole the headlines this week.
Well, let's talk about Dabo for a moment. Just look, I like him as a coach. The few encounters I've had with him personally, seems to be a great guy. He needs to adapt to the times, but you can tell the pressure's starting to catch up.
Yeah. That was the takeaway. If you listen to that rant, and if people don't know, it was like a 5.5-minute rant to a caller on his radio show who basically said he was Tommy Bowden at 4-4. And I thought that was wrong. He's obviously not Tommy Bowden, one of the top coaches in the game, maybe ever. Who else has done 12 10-win seasons? But they're down. And we all know the shelf life for any of these coaches and expectations, not minute to minute, it's second to second. It's what have you done for me lately? Clemson is 7-7 in its last 14. I mentioned 4-4 this season. They've been one of the most disappointing teams in the country. And rightly so. For 11.5 million, fans deserve better. And, I think Dabo said a lot of things that he wanted to say, but for some reason, this guy triggered him. A man of faith dropped a smart ass comment, dumbass comment, bullcrap comment, kind of really exposed what is going on inside Dabo's mind. He said, there's too much expectation and not enough appreciation. Well, Dabo, when you signed that $11 million contract, they want it every year, and they sure as heck don't want it to fall off the shelf, which it has. Not to say he can't get it back, but we're witnessing in real time, perhaps, the end of a dynasty. Well, and I think that's what's so frustrating to the fans, no matter how it was conveyed.
Well, let me ask you that. How often, and let's think back, Jimbo's under this microscope, Dabo's under this microscope. Do coaches who appear to lose their fastball get it back? How often can you think of recent examples?
I can name a team, Florida State. I was just thinking about this. They're going to be the first team really that was dominant at the beginning of the CFP and now has gone full circle and come back if they get in the playoff. And it looks like right now they will. But yeah, once it goes, it's hard. The thing with Dabo is it's not an age thing. This is not Joe Paterno aging out or some coach losing his mojo. He's 53. He's right in the wheelhouse of when coaches hit their peak. And for him, it seems like it's petering out. Now, the reasons are the reasons. He's failed to get into the portal with both feet. He's been really insular in hiring his assistants from the Clemson family. Now, that changed with Garrett Riley at offensive coordinator, got rid of Brandon Streeter, one of those homegrown guys. But so far, it hasn't worked out. And Garrett Riley was the best name left on the board at that point. I think he misses Brent Venables. I really do. Look, Brent was going to take a job sooner or later. It seemed like he's rejuvenated Oklahoma. And he is and was one of the best defensive minds in the country. And so you miss that. Guys haven't played out. Cade Klubnik, ran DJ Uiagalelei out of town. He hasn't panned out to his potential. So when that happens, yeah, sometimes it's hard to get it back. I think he can get it back for all the reasons I mentioned. He's accomplished. He's a relatively young man. And there is an expectation there. If you're going to leave Clemson, where are you going to go? Because Nick isn't retiring anytime soon. I think he wants that job, but the way he's going, when that day comes, if it comes, they're not going to hire him.
Dennis, great stuff, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us.
All right. Thanks so much.
At Academy Sports and Outdoors, bikes for the whole family are just a click away. Buy online at academy.com with our free in-store assembly. Your next set of wheels, plus helmets, pads, and water bottles will be waiting for you at our in-store pickup counter. Get to the fun faster with our in-store pickup and free assembly at Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Coming up next, Billy and Caroline, they've got to talk about Bama at LSU. How's that one going to play out? Let's listen to the duo.
Welcome into Up to the Second, presented by our friends over at Academy. He is Billy Liucci. I am Caroline Fenton. And Billy also apparently Travis Kelce's best friend. Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift, third wheel.
No. I've actually known their crew out there for a while. Not just Travis, but about four of their close friends. They all grew up in Ohio together. It's one of my favorite groups of people that I met him when Johnny was through. I didn't actually meet him with Johnny. Met him when Johnny was playing in Cleveland. Met one of them, my man Joe, and then met with the rest of the group through one of Johnny's buddies, Super Bowl weekend in Houston, and we had Vegas weekend a few years ago, the Canelo fight, and then they just happened to be going to that game, and I connected with some of them. We went up there for a few, half that game. It was fun, though. It was a blast, sitting up there during the, for the walk-off. We had a little party up there, celebration, and then also just funny to watch, when they put him on the on the big screen when the Taylor Swift song came on. Everybody, like the whole bottom deck's filming. But it's like just seeing him, now versus like 5 years ago, he's the exact same dude. And it's not just that. He was already a great player, but I'm pretty sure there's been 2 Super Bowl wins since then. Maybe he had already won one. I'm not positive, but and even before that was like when he was pretty young in the league. I remember sitting there having a long conversation with him and Gronk. Gronk rented a house for the Super Bowl weekend when the Patriots played in Houston. He was hurt, so he didn't play. So every day after all the Super Bowl parties, day, night, people would just go over there to his house. And we went over there, the Ohio crew, and we went over there and just sitting there talking with those two. So I met Gronk through Johnny, again, Vegas. Right. But just sitting in the kitchen, and it was me and those two, and they were talking about the tight end position. I was like, there are a lot of football fans and players and coaches or whatever that would probably pay good money to listen to these two Hall of Famers talk ball. But at the time, Travis was really young. But what I was getting at is he hadn't changed one single bit. And I love their podcast, him and his brothers. Because they're just like every pair of brothers, every pair of roommates, every pair of football teammates that, that I've ever known, that you've ever known, anybody listening, like that's how they come across. If you're listening to this and you don't listen to their podcast and you like, I listen to that one all the time because I started seeing their clips on, Instagram and Reels and stuff, and they're both just really funny, just down to earth.
They're just regular, normal guys. And that's always how I thought they were. And then when I started listening to the podcast, and Jason Kelsey has a documentary on Amazon Prime, which if you haven't watched it,
I've heard.
Great.
I have not watched it, though.
It's really good. And I think that just kind of confirmed what I believed. Of these are just regular guys that now are uber famous, not just in the football world, but also extending out into non-football fans. Like they were on SNL, of course, Travis dating Taylor Swift. I feel like Travis Kelsey's become much more of a topic of conversation amongst my girlfriends than he ever has been. Yeah, so
I got a lot of my friends.
I love to see good people have great success.
A lot of my friends were way. It's not just Taylor. It's Travis too. Where the girls are like, oh, how but
he's cute.
Tell you what, his brother can sing. I love the Eagles. I'm looking forward to it, and I think Travis might be on it this year, but I'm looking forward to the Eagles Christmas songs again that those O-linemen were singing last year. Hey, did you see that? If you didn't, you need to go back.
All of their voices
are they're like, really
Jordan
good.
Mailata has a beautiful voice. Like when I first heard it, I think I saw maybe a clip of it on TikTok or Instagram or something. I thought they were lip syncing, because all of their voices are genuinely very good and almost made for like a Christmas song.
Well, Caroline, you know me. So when we left the game, like the two of us that went, we left the game and I guess left the suite after we said bye to everybody. And then they went down to Texas Live on the way out before they hopped on the plane to go back. And there was a T Swift sing along that took place that went viral. And you know me, like the fact that I missed a viral sing-along, and like I said the other day, I think I was talking to like on the radio, I don't care who it was, what artist. If I knew the words and can sing, I want that going out there for all the world to see, because I'm going to sing it well.
Absolutely.
But I will say this, and if you want to go in Nashville, you let me know. I'll come to that too, because I know we got people up there that want to go. But I already purchased yesterday 2 tickets, A&M's bye week next year, Creed in Houston at Cynthia Woods.
I figured something related to Creed was coming.
There will be
along
singing.
Those lines. I have a feeling.
Now, doesn't he sing a lot at the Preds games?
Creed?
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably.
There's like a little box.
Yeah.
And he's sung there more than once during games, like during intermission.
They may have done it during the playoffs.
They did.
Because during like every game in between every period, they'll have, like cover bands, like the bands that you see on Broadway that are all really great.
But
like,
it's
we're
it's
lucky in
actually
Nashville.
them. And people that
Yeah,
were there
but
thought it was a cover and were texting me, and I was like, no, that's them.
that's him. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they during the playoffs, they always get like big name
Yeah.
singers, bands that maybe in the playoffs. Because I went to a playoff game and Keith Urban was singing the national anthem. So Toby Keith has sung. Brad Paisley has sung it in the playoffs. Unfortunately, Reds haven't made the playoffs in a year or two. But yeah, no, it's really fun. It's really fun to see them all at Reds games. But count me in for Creed. Because I'll
All
be
right,
there.
done.
Whether it's an
done.
actual Creed concert or a Billy Liucci cover
Either
concert
or.
of any Creed song, count me in.
Either or. Count me in for this weekend of SEC football, Caroline. I mean, the game of the week in college football, obviously, is going to take place at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa. Your LSU Tigers, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And earlier that day in Oxford, my Texas A&M Aggies, Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss Rebels, two very high-profile games. I mean, one of them, well, Bama LSU is the game of the week in college football.
Mm-hmm.
A&M Ole Miss is still incredibly significant, not just for Jimbo and the Aggies, but really for Ole Miss as they try to remain a one-loss team that has beaten LSU, lost to Bama. They're kind of trying to fight to, I would say they could create that three-way tie, and I don't know what happens then, but it's a massive game for Ole Miss. It's very important for A&M just based on the, season and program trajectory. And then there's a huge one taking place in Athens as well that I think is a fascinating game. So let's start with the big one. Let's start with LSU, Alabama, and we'll talk a little A&M, South Carolina, but really focus on what's coming up with Ole Miss. So your initial thoughts on this thing at LSU with the walk-off 2-point conversion of, Jaden Daniels to Mason Taylor last year. Bama wants revenge.
Mm-hmm.
But damn, this LSU offense, the way Washington's played the last 2 weeks, I would say looks like the best offense in college football rolling into T-Town.
Well, and credit in the world to Washington and Michael Penix Jr., but both he and that offense, they've had their down days. And credit to that team. They still found ways to win football games. We haven't seen LSU's offense have a down day. No. We haven't seen LSU's offense have an uncharacteristically not dominant day. I mean, LSU has put up over 500 yards in all but one game this year. And that one game that they didn't put up 500, it was 450 against Florida State. Oh. And LSU's averaging 550 yards a game. Like, there is no down day. Now, granted, LSU's offense hasn't seen a defense as good as Alabama's. And you call this the game of the week, I would agree. I think this is the game of the week in college football. But I could make a pretty good argument that this is the matchup of the season. Of LSU's offense versus Alabama's defense. LSU's offense, the number one offense in the country, and Alabama's defense, which is, really carried Alabama for the most part throughout the season, but also an Alabama defense that I feel like is finding its stride, an Alabama team as a whole, really, that's finding its stride and finding its identity at this point in the season.
I'm thinking of Bama, right? And I watched them hold Ole Miss to one touchdown in the first half, one touchdown in the second half, 14 points total. I watched them when they had it rolling in the second halves against Tennessee and A&M. I watched them hold Texas' offense in check for 3 quarters. But I also watched Ewers and Worthy and A.D. Mitchell light them up down the stretch in the fourth. I watched A&M move up and down the field in the first half and score 17, and really, were it not for 1 4th and 1 play, you're probably scoring 24. Max and Aniyah Smith didn't connect on a wide open touchdown pass on the second drive. You might have been that they were that close, a missed open receiver and a 1 yard for maybe scoring 28 on Bama and a half. I watched Joe Milton in Tennessee, just like you did, kind of carve them up early in that football game. Credit, it's a 60-minute game, and Bama did what they needed to do in all but one of those. But this is a different beast they're running into. I think LSU is going to score, and I think they're going to score, not at will, but I think they're going to get into the 30s in this football game for sure. And I don't know that – it's weird, Caroline, because I want to say I don't know that Bama can do it. They scored 24 against Arkansas. The offense produced 24 against A&M. Who else did they 24 against Ole Miss. I mean, these are the better teams they played. They had a defensive touchdown against Tennessee. How many did they end up with in that one?
It was, 38
or 33?
34.
34, so 27 offensive points there. Like, the question is, what do Burton and Milroe and those running backs, what are they capable of doing against this shaky LSU defense, in particular the secondary? Can they do what they did to A&M and kind of go bombs away on them? But I don't think that's consistent enough to be able to keep pace. I'm slightly trending LSU in this one. And I feel like the only reason it's slight is because that whole it's Nick Saban and Bama. I like LSU in this matchup because I think if they have to score with them, they can. And I think if Bama has to score with them, they can a little, but not for 60 minutes.
If it gets into a shootout, I think that plays right into how LSU wants to win football games. And granted, I say that understanding that LSU lost a shootout to Ole Miss. But Alabama's offense is not Ole Miss's offense.
Mm-hmm.
That if Jalen Milroe and Jaden Daniels need to get in a shootout, Jaden Daniels wins that battle every single day and twice on Sundays. And also keep in mind, I understand that LSU is going to be without 3 starting corners this weekend.
Yeah.
That their best corner, Zay Alexander, is out this weekend and for the foreseeable future, that they're going to be down their best defensive lineman and second leading sacker, Makai Wingo, who got surgery over the bye week, and he's out for the next 6 weeks. But this LSU team hasn't won a single game on their schedule because of what the defense does. They've won every single game on their schedule in spite of what the defense has done, because the offense has just said, okay, hold my beer. We'll carry this entire team on our shoulders. And really, more specifically, Jaden Daniels can carry this team on his shoulders. One thing that I think kind of plays into LSU's favor is that I don't think we've seen Alabama play a full 60-minute football game all season long.
No.
Against Tennessee, they didn't show up until the second half.
Yeah.
And against Tennessee, they were down 13-0 at one point. But Tennessee was in the red zone twice, had to settle for field goals twice. LSU doesn't settle for field goals. LSU gets in the end zone. So when Tennessee was up 13-0, LSU in that instance, in that situation, would be up 21-0. And Tennessee was able to run up the score even more later in the first half. So, I mean, if Alabama doesn't show up until the second half, they're going to dig themselves into a hole that I don't think that offense can dig themselves out.
I'm with you. Bama scored 6 first-half points against Ole Miss. They scored 7 first-half points, right, against Tennessee, or was it 10?
They scored
21-10?
7.
Yeah, 20
It was 20-7.
Yeah, 27, yeah. And they scored 10 first-half points against A&M. I mean, those are the 3, and I think they had 10 going in the fourth quarter, 10 or 13 against Texas. Those are the 4 biggest games they play, the 4 best teams they've played, and they've done nothing in the first half. And like you said, if that happens Saturday, they're in trouble. The question is, how bad is this LSU's defense? By LSU standards, I think it's threatening to be historically bad. And I'm sure they skewed the numbers quite a bit with Army, last weekend, or before the bye, and that offense. I'm sure that pulled things way back into normal. I don't know who do they play the week before they play A&M.
Before A&M,
another
Georgia State.
Okay, so they'll pull those 2 teams will combine for like next to 0 yards, right? But
and then also Auburn. Auburn is one of the worst pass offenses in the country. They played Auburn the week before Army, So I think that maybe there might be
So they
some
could get
deceiving
torched.
confidence in the defense because of the offenses that they've played the past
And I
few
think
weeks.
it's smoke and mirrors, and I think Bama and Milroe and Burton could torch them. But here's the only way I think Bama wins this game, and it's well within the realm of possibility. Dallas Turner leads the SEC in sacks with 8. And that Bama defensive front, I watched them up close and personal. They are stout. They got some massive dudes on the inside. They still have linebackers that can run. They can get after the quarterback. They did it with Ewers for most of that game. They did it to Max Johnson. They did it to Milton. That was the game-changing play there with the sack. If they get after and torment Jaden Daniels, they'll have a shot. And they can keep that score low. Who got after and tormented Jaden Daniels? Did Arkansas get after him pretty good? I'm trying to remember that game. I know they scored 34 and Daniels played a good game, but I felt like he was under some duress. That one, A&M certainly got after him last year. Georgia got after him. He was hurt, but both those teams were whipping the LSU front and getting after him. Tennessee did so last year. And I think even this year, Florida State got after them. When those things have happened, they're still going to get their plays. Neighbors, Daniels, and that running game's getting better. But, obviously Brian Thomas. But when you get after them, you can get sacks, get off the field, and keep that score down into what I think will be a manageable area for Alabama.
And this is a different line than last year. Keep in mind, both of LSU's starting tackles last year were true freshmen.
Yeah.
So now this year, they're sophomores, a full season of college football under the belt, a full off season. The line is much improved. And also, this is a different Jaden Daniels.
Yes, it is.
Jaden Daniels that was maybe a little bit more skittish last year is so much more confident this season. But yeah, Arkansas did get to Jaden Daniels from the majority of the first half, where this offense kind of struggled. Arkansas was up, I think, maybe even 2 scores at one point in the first half. And really the thing that saved them was LSU's red zone defense. Of all things, LSU's defense coming to the rescue, where they held Arkansas to 2 or 3 field goals in the red zone. And that allowed LSU to be able to come back, had some offensive firepower with a long touchdown bomb before the end of the first half. And then in the second half, that's when you saw that true game of ping pong of LSU touchdown, Arkansas touchdown, LSU touchdown, and LSU just had the ball last and they were able to score last. So it's not like any defense hasn't been able to at least limit LSU or hasn't put pressure on Jaden Daniels, but nobody's been able to limit what they want to do for a full 60 minutes.
So what is your prediction in this one?
Honestly, I don't feel great about this one. I think that there's a very clear and obvious path to victory for LSU if the offense has its best day of the season, if the defense can just get a few timely stops. I mean, Alabama's given up 35 sacks this season, which is a ridiculous stat number, especially considering how mobile Jalen Milroe is.
Yeah.
So maybe this defensive line finds something and they're able to get to Jalen Milroe maybe, more than they have so far this season. I mean, Harold Perkins only has 3 sacks on the season. He's the leading sacker on this team. But something about being in Bryant-Denny Stadium and something about having to rely on so many inexperienced and young players in the secondary against a quarterback that isn't just able to, but is willing to throw the deep ball. I mean, he had 79-yard touchdown pass against Ole Miss or Arkansas or whatever. I mean, you go down the list of 50-plus yard touchdown passes that Jalen Milroe has thrown so far this season. It scares me.
So you have Bama close, and
Bama
sounds
close.
like a higher scoring. I think LSU has lost to the teams that can outscore them, and they've lost to Ole Miss and they've lost to Florida State, and I think both of those teams are infinitely better, not infinitely, but they're just, in the case of LSU, yes, but just a lot better than Alabama offensively. Scheme-wise, but particularly in what they can do in the passing game. I just don't think Bama has that. I don't think they can exploit the LSU weakness quite as much as those teams did. I think they'll hold LSU to a lower scoring total, but I like LSU in this one, 31-27.
Oh, so you think it's going to be
33-28. Yeah, I do. I think it's going to be
I
a
wouldn't
little
be
lower.
surprised if we're looking at like a 45-41 kind of situation.
It could. I could see it, but I just think there's going to be drive-killing plays by the Alabama defense.
Probably
And then on the flip side, I think Alabama's going to have drive-killing plays of their own offensively when they have the ball. Penalties, just Milroe holding on to it too long. Like you said, maybe it's not. It's just I think I'm not confident in the consistency of that Alabama passing game. I am with the LSU passing game. I do worry about Dallas Turner and co getting after Daniels, but even if so, that's where I'm landing in that 31-34 to 27, 28, 30 type mild shootout. So
let's look at the other game in the SEC West.
So one team is going to come out of Saturday night feeling very good about where they're at in the SEC. Actually, if LSU wins, both Bama and LSU are still going to be right in the mix. One team is either going to be feeling great, or they're going to feel like their chance is officially, it's already dead, and that would be Ole Miss. If they can beat A&M, they're going to be sitting there in potentially in a three-way tie for first. Even if not, if Bama wins, they're a game off that pace. Right now, Ole Miss has to be rooting hard for LSU, because if Bama wins, LSU's behind them. They're probably not forging a three-way tie, and they're really 2 games behind Bama. A Bama victory all but locks up, I think, the West for the Tide. Ole Miss can hang in it, or Lane Kiffin's going to have a lot of words to eat if he loses to Jimbo Fisher and the Aggies, because all that dude has done is run his mouth from day one. And there's part of me that's like, I'm here for it. I don't hate it if he's doing it to another school. It's funny, it's entertaining. On the flip side, he's gone above and beyond. The dude's obsession with Jimbo Fisher and A&M, I don't know if it's the incessant ass-kissing of Nick Saban that he feels like he has to do, just throw himself on the sword every time someone, dare defy, Nick, or if it's just social media clicks and hits, which he enjoys seeing himself on social media going viral, or if it's just a genuine disdain for Jimbo and A&M. I don't know, Caroline. I think there's some level of jealousy there in that A&M and Jimbo have all this stuff that he wishes he had at Ole Miss. It's also why he'll leave Ole Miss one day for another job. He would crawl to Texas A&M tomorrow if they offered him the job. And so I don't know what is it DJ Durkin, because Durkin left him. I know there's some animosity there. I actually heard he left a whiteboard message with a touchdown play that they scored last year. And addressed it to Durkin. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's some bad blood. This is going to be a grudge match. Lane knows what he said. Those players know what their coach said. He's probably motivating them. They have a lot to play for. Texas A&M gave up 400 yards just about rushing last year to Quinshon Judkins, Jackson Dart, that Ole Miss offense. That's, for Durkin, for those guys, Kiffin said something about running all over the 5-star D lineman. He called Bryce Anderson the B word during the game. There's a lot going on. A&M defense has been great all year, save one game at Miami. They're going to have to be great Saturday, Caroline, for A&M to have a chance. We know the offense has to play better. We've seen it a half here, a half here. We haven't seen it for a game. That's non-negotiable. We got to see that. But regardless, how we're talking about maybe not a lot of defense played in these LSU games? A&M's defense is going to have to show up in the way the Bama defense did against Ole Miss to keep that score at a point where A&M can win it. If they're going to win the game, it's going to be DJ Durkin getting revenge on Lane Kiffin, in my opinion.
I'm wondering when Lane Kiffin is going to learn his lesson. At this point, I'm not holding my breath that he ever will. Because every single year, Lane Kiffin runs his mouth on social media before playing Alabama and sings the praises of Nick Saban and tries to dunk on Alabama fans the entire week leading up to that game. And I sit there thinking, maybe if you took a little time off Twitter and took a little bit more time game planning, then maybe you would have gone out there and scored more than 10 points.
Yeah.
I feel the same way against Texas A&M. That it is so obvious that against Alabama and against Jimbo Fisher, that Lane Kiffin feels this need to win the Twitter war. And it feels kind of like a little brother syndrome.
Yeah, it does.
Kind of like a let me poke at you, let me bug you, let me get underneath your skin, when in reality, the real battle, the real war is won on the football field. And every time Lane Kiffin runs his mouth on Twitter, he seems to lose on Saturday. I noticed that when Ole Miss played LSU. Of course, Ole Miss lost to Alabama. Lane Kiffin was running his mouth. Lane Kiffin was pretty silent the week leading up to LSU.
He was.
He was fairly tame. And I'm thinking leading into that week, like, Lane Kiffin's paying attention to game planning. Lane Kiffin doesn't feel the need to dunk on anyone on Twitter this week. What's he cooking up? So it's just, of course, it's no real indication of what we're going to see on Saturday, but it always is very interesting to me. But one thing on the Texas A&M side of things, I need Max Johnson to get rid of the football, and I need him to do it sooner. Holding on to the football too long and a shaky O-line is a bad combination.
That's what I was worried about when Connor got hurt. That combo, but also I think I need Jimbo and Petrino to be in that lab this week and figure out ways to effectively dial up plays where Max can get rid of the ball quicker, like where he's encouraged by the play call, by design, to get rid of it more quickly, like those slants, those throws, the quick bubbles and things like that, and Max has to play his part too, and actually, when it's there, get rid of it. See it, throw it. But it starts, Caroline, to me, with the Aggie offensive line. They're going to have to play their best game of the year. Ole Miss has a pretty good defense. They're not great, but they're pretty good. I don't think they're as good as Tennessee up front. I know they're not as good up front, but even as a defense, and I don't think they're as good as – I know they're not as good as Bama, but they might be as good as a Miami. Like, they're pretty good defensively. They're better than they typically are. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is, outside of LSU, the scoring. Ole Miss 28 against Auburn, 27 against Arkansas, 14 against Bama. It took them a while, till very late in the game, to get to 30 against Tulane. They're not just lining up and just lighting everyone up. So I think for this game, it could be defined and won by which of these teams can line up and get a yard to keep drives alive. Which of these teams, because Jimbo went for it 4 times last week, it felt like a very dramatic change over their MO and their mentality in recent weeks. A welcome change, mind you. But if they're going to do that, Ole Miss is going to do that. Who's going to convert these 3rd and 2s and 4th and 1s the most? Who's going to get touchdowns in the red zone instead of field goals? Is Lane going to try to score on 4th and 6 inside the 30 against this A&M defense? Tennessee tried and failed. Bama tried and failed. Teams have not had a lot of success doing that, and I think he'll just continue because it's just the way he is. So those little battles, I think, are what determine this. I worry for A&M all about Trey Harris. I don't think he's Burton, but the Louisiana Tech transfer has had a really good year when he's been healthy. He's a dangerous, dangerous weapon, and for as good as this defense is, there are plays to be had over the top against this secondary, and Lane's going to take his shots. They're going to set it up with a heavy dose of running. That's going to be, I think, Can you prevent them from hitting a couple long touchdowns and make them work their way into the end zone? And I think if you do that, much like what Bama's going to try to do to LSU, you could keep that scoring down and give yourself a chance to win.
It's interesting because you mentioned the outlier of Ole Miss's schedule is LSU. I've wondered, was that a product of changing approach and play calling? Because against Alabama, Ole Miss was incredibly conservative.
They
just
were
kind of dinking and dunking and running the football. I'm like, where are those explosive plays that we saw so much last year with Jackson Dart? Get to the LSU game and they're throwing it deep. Like, they have no problem hitting those explosive plays. Jackson Dart has no problem stepping back and hitting a receiver 30 or 40 yards downfield. So is that play calling or is that defense? Is that a shaky LSU secondary that has the tendency to get burned? And also an LSU defense that gave up over 300 yards in missed tackles.
Yeah.
Like, if you're gifting 300 yards
absurd.
on a silver platter, I hope you put up 55 points.
Yeah, that's wild.
So when this Ole Miss team goes up against a stout defense, that's when you start to see the 24s and the 21s, because I don't think that Ole Miss plays with the level of physicality and toughness in the trenches that we might see an Alabama team play or a Texas A&M team play or a Tennessee defensive front that we've seen them play with so far this season. So, LSU's defense doesn't play with that physicality. So this season, I mean, historically, yes, but this season, no.
I will say there's a hole to be had. There are plays to be made against this A&M secondary, but there are also a lot of plays that A&M's going to make behind the line of scrimmage. This might if it's not the best defense Ole Miss has faced this year, it's the second best, and it's a close second to Alabama. Statistically, A&M's been better. They lead the SEC. They're 7th nationally. Alabama's 15th nationally. Georgia's 8th. A&M's first in sacks, first in tackles for loss. I think they're 13th against the run, 25th in scoring defense. So this is a pretty damn good A&M defense. I wouldn't call it elite, but they're pretty damn good. They're a top 10 defense in the country through 8 games. It's as good as anything Ole Miss has faced. And when Ole Miss faced a good defense, they scored 14 points. I don't think A&M's going to hold them to 14. I think the magic number for the Aggies might be, can you hold them to in that 24-27 range? And that's about, in games that matter. I went through and looked, forget about the lopsided. That's about, 10 points below what they're typically, 7 to 10 points below what they're typically going to score. But again, they barely topped that against Arkansas. They barely topped that against Auburn. Can you do that? And if you do, I think A&M's got a real shot to win it. I don't know, Caroline, if I'm going to pick them yet. On the road, I don't think I can pick the Aggies. I do feel like they're capable of this upset. They're more than capable of this mild upset. But it's just when a team's lost 8 straight road games, true road games, it's hard to pick them. It just is. And by the way, what started this road losing streak was a loss in Oxford. And in the second game of that streak was a loss in Baton Rouge 2 years ago. Zach Calzada as the QB. A&M, believe it or not, Caroline was number 11 in the country entering that game in Oxford. They dropped a touchdown pass that would have put them ahead in the fourth quarter. They haven't won a road game since. Does it snap on Saturday morning? I'm reluctant to pick that. I've picked this team, I think, to win every game but one that they've played this year so far. I actually like them to beat Bama at home. I was thinking I picked against them at Tennessee. They're just different on the road until you prove me otherwise.
I hear you, but I like A&M.
Nice.
Because any team that I know plays with a certain level of physicality and just like straight up just nastiness that I know this A&M defensive front plays with, I'm going to side with that team because I don't see Ole Miss play with that level of toughness. I picked Auburn to beat Ole Miss.
Yeah, you did.
Because Auburn plays with that chip on their shoulder, that blue collar, that tough Auburn mentality.
But with zero offense. With zero offense.
Zero offense.
A&M has shown at times that they can move the ball and score, and we know they have talent. They just, if there's a game for them to put it together, this needs to be it. it can change the whole trajectory and outlook of their season, with the next two being Mississippi State at home, Abilene Christian at home. You could set up to roll into LSU on a 4-game win streak. You could roll into LSU at 5-2 in the SEC with a road win over a top 10 Ole Miss team, with your two losses being narrow setbacks at Tennessee and to Alabama. It would look and feel a hell of a lot different. This is a big game for Jimbo. It's an even bigger game for the Rebels, who have their eyes on a potential SEC West title. I don't know about the 3-way tie. I guess I haven't looked into it, but I don't see a way for them to get there. But hopefully their hopes and dreams of that go down in flames on Saturday in Oxford. But we'll see. We'll see. One more before we go. The big one in Athens. And that's one I think the whole country's paying very close attention to, because unlike those other games we talked about, yet, if one of those teams beats Georgia and wins the SEC, it's different. That's the game that could shake up the national title and playoff race the most, is if Eli Drinkwitz, Luther Burden and company go into Athens and dethrone the 2-time defending champs.
It's not out of the realm of possibility in the slightest, because I love this Missouri offense. I think Luther Burden is obviously biased, second best receiver in the SEC and probably the second best receiver in the country, only behind Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
I think that Brady Cook has been such a sound quarterback that he can air it out. He's good in the intermediate passing game. He takes care of the football. I feel like this Missouri team has gone under such they have a great running game with Cordy Trader, but I'm just not quite sure if they're at that point where they can contend with Georgia in Athens. Yeah. I understand they don't have Brock Bowers, but we saw a Georgia team without Brock Bowers this past week against Florida, and that Georgia offense was humming.
Every time we want to say Georgia, they just come out and do what they did to Kentucky, or they do what they did to Florida. I think they're going to do what they did to Missouri, too. And I think Missouri almost beating them last year, you could look at it two ways. Drink does a good job of scheming them up, or it's a different football. Like, Georgia's going to say, we haven't forgot what happened last year. That's what I think happens. I don't think there's an upset in Athens on Saturday.
I don't think there is either. I think that Missouri's next big win could come against Tennessee. Tennessee comes into Columbia, a Tennessee offense that looked good against Kentucky. I think they played the kind of game that they wanted to offensively, where you run twice as much as you throw the ball, but Joe Milton makes the throws that he needs to throw. But I think that Georgia plays a certain level when it matters.
Yeah.
And obviously, yes, every game in the SEC matters.
Yeah.
But going to Auburn, I don't think they really respected Auburn very much, and they played Auburn incredibly close last season, like you mentioned, against Missouri. Missouri wasn't a very good team last year. I don't think they respected Missouri.
Yeah.
But when everyone was talking about, Georgia potentially dropping that game against Kentucky, they said, all right, that's fine. We hear you, and we'll prove you wrong. Georgia, Florida, same thing. So many national people were picking Florida to upset Georgia. They said, no, Brock Bowers, we love you, number 19, but we don't necessarily need you to win football games because we're the best team in the country, and it's the next man up. So I think they're going to do the same against an incredibly good Missouri team. All respect in the world to what Eli Drinkwitz has done, the renovations this team has made over the offseason, but Missouri's just not quite there yet. They don't have that level of talent that the Georgias, the A&Ms, the LSUs, and the Alabamas do in the SEC.
All right, Caroline, another wild weekend on tap in the SEC, also around college football. We'll have a lot to talk about next week and some previewing to do, and we'll circle back and revisit our Player of the Year candidates, because there could be a lot of sorting this Saturday. You want to take us home? Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. Hoping your Aggies knock the Rebs out of SEC West contention, hoping LSU takes care of business this weekend. But we'll have a full recap of all the action coming up next week. And, of course, continue to preview the Week 11 slate coming up next week on Up to the Second.
We're wrapping it up here. Week 10 already going to be in the books. Thanks so much for watching Up to the Second College Football, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors.